You've gotten to a point where your practice is successful. You're in this in between stage of where it would be good to hire someone to take things off your plate more because you're finding yourself having to stay late to fit patients in. And it would be nice to be able to have someone see patients for you without you always having to be there. But you're afraid that if you hire someone, what if they don't stay and then you have to start all over again, or what if they end up taking leaving and then taking your patients with them. So this is Chen Yen, 6 and 7 figure practice makeover mentor at introvertedvisionary.com, and your show host today of Cairo Secure. And let's have a look at this because one of the challenges is I got this question from one of you saying, who is to say a potential hire wouldn't just open their practice next door after working for me? So let's talk about first 3 reasons to consider hiring even despite this, and then let's talk about what are some tips, that practical tips that can allow you to have a practice where you have someone being able to see people for you and you can count on them, and that they also really appreciate being a part of your practice and do want to stay. So first reason about why to You've gotten to a point where your practice is successful. You're in this in between stage of where it would be good to hire someone to take things off your plate more because you're finding yourself having to stay late to fit patients in. And it would be nice to be able to have someone see patients for you without you always having to be there. But you're afraid that if you hire someone, what if they don't stay and then you have to start all over again, or what if they end up taking leaving and then taking your patients with them. So this is Chen Yen, 6 and 7 figure practice makeover mentor at introvertedvisionary.com, and your show host today of Cairo Secure. And let's have a look at this because one of the challenges is I got this question from one of you saying, who is to say a potential hire wouldn't just open their practice next door after working for me? So let's talk about first 3 reasons to consider hiring even despite this, and then let's talk about what are some tips, that practical tips that can allow you to have a practice where you have someone being able to see people for you and you can count on them, and that they also really appreciate being a part of your practice and do want to stay. So first reason about why to consider hiring anyway, even if you might be concerned about how someone might just come and see patients and then end up taking your patients from you. Now, if you let this concern hold you back, then it's going to be to where, you might, maybe you don't feel the pain as much right now. Maybe you're still able to handle seeing patients and juggling different hats. But at a point in time, you're going to reach this point where it's going to wear you down. And what will happen if you go on vacation? Will your patients still be served in a timely way? Is money still coming in the door? So at a certain point in time, you're just going to hit that tipping point where it's going to be really painful. So if you're already thinking about hiring someone, then it's a good time to be thinking to be actually already looking for a good hire. And then now a second reason about why to consider hiring despite being afraid of this concern of what if people, they will just leave, or um, what if they take patients from me? And also it's like, we can't control we can't control whether someone else will leave or open up their practice. But what we can control are a few things that can help support them wanting to stay. For example, one reason why an associate or new hire may not stay is because maybe you're not busy enough. And one of the most challenging things is for someone to have decided to work at your practice come in and perhaps even be provided with the vision of being able to see, patients, and then it's like it's really slow for them because it's not very fun to um, to sit there and then not be getting patients. And so this is where, do you have a system in place that supports getting new patients? Do you have a system in place that, even if it supports you getting patients right now, enough for you, do you have an approach that is going to be effective to bring in patients in a greater scale, like more number of patients, and even consistently, to be able to um, have your associate be busy? So that is one thing. Another thing that you can do also, and is one of the biggest mistakes a lot of chiropractors make, is hiring them, but then not necessarily fielding them patients as quickly as you could be, because it can be really common to feel like, well, um, I want to just give my associate a little bit at a time, and then I still need to be able to make enough revenue in the practice to sustain myself, and so I'm just going to make a lot more money by continuing to see them myself. So maybe I just only field my associate a little bit, a small number of patients, and so that is ends up being limited thinking, because what happens again is, if you're the new hire you just hired is again twiddling their thumbs, they get discouraged, or maybe they start to look for another job to also work at, or another practice, and then ends up splitting their time between yours and someone else's. And or just, even if you are paying them on salary, it can be, it's not it, they don't get started off as quickly. So just keep that in mind. How can you field your patients over to your new associate? And that goes back to faster, and that goes back to you likely having more confidence with that when you have a steady flow of patients, like a system that actually brings in a steady flow of patients in the door beyond what you're typically used to. Do you have that in place? Many times when we work with our clients, they come to us for exactly that, because they don't, they've been able to be really, really busy up till this point, but don't have the systems, that a tried and true system, to support getting even additional more new patients. So another thing that you could do is, to actually inspire an associate to want to stay, and it is to, and also, actually, in terms of, actually, before I bring that up, the fear of how you might be concerned that people, like an associate, would leave, is, how do you deal with that, right? Is one thing is also to put systems in place, so that, because we can't control whether someone will leave or not, can we? Circumstances might change. Maybe they something changed in their family situation, or had to move, and so things can always come up. But if you have solid systems in place that can easily train someone new to slide into the role smoothly and effortlessly, then you don't have to be as worried about turnover. So do you have systems, or are you creating systems right now that can support that? And so that's also important. And the other thing is, how can you create a culture that makes people want to stay? So, just as someone may want to leave, there's also just as someone who would love to be about the culture. I mean, be love to be a part of a practice that has a wonderful culture. And what is the culture that you're creating in your practice? Do you really have a culture that fosters everyone, to whoever works for you, to really want to work for you and want to be a part of something bigger? So are you really clear about what your vision is, and what is your mission? Are you aligning your whole team, including your new associate, to be excited about that? Because those are the things that people stay for. And so that's also really important. And then, how is your clinic communicating the credibility of whoever you hire, associate wise? How is your clinic communicating their credibility to your patient base, and to your new potential patients. So, for example, I know a chiropractor who was working at, like, he ended up becoming an associate as part of the practice, and there are a few practitioners who work there who are not just chiropractors, but and but also chiropractors. And he said that the receptionist, the way that the receptionist was talking about him, it didn't really seem like it seemed, for one, it seemed like um that person wasn't really um, showcasing truly the credibility of this chiropractor, and encouraging people to book with this new chiropractor, right? So that becomes important, because what is the confidence that you're giving your potential patients? What's the confidence you're giving your existing patients in having this new associate actually see them? So now, as far as we just talked about two main reasons why you should consider hiring, even if you're concerned about whether they would just, if they might just leave, and maybe even be afraid of them leaving and taking patients from you. And so, the one of the reasons to consider hiring someone new to help you anyway is, let's say someone does end up opening up their practice elsewhere. So what? There's enough people living in your area. There's enough people to go around in an area who could use chiropractic. And there are going to be some people who resonate with someone else. And then there'll be some people who will much rather see people at your practice or you. So why worry about whether someone else is going to be able to help um, more patients? Now, of course, I understand what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, well, yeah, but it's a different story when I've worked so hard to um, to generate patients in my clinic, to train this person, and then they leave and then they take patients with them. That doesn't feel okay, right? So this is where you can protect yourself. And now, in terms of non-competes and things like that, those are often sometimes harder to enforce. But what you can do is you can have it written in the contract, for example, that if they were to leave and then take patients with them, there's a financial agreement already in place that they actually sign. So that way, um, you that is more enforceable typically, right? So having, and also having that laying it out even when the person is hired, not like kind of hidden in the contract and you don't talk about it, but rather just being upfront about it. I work really hard in the clinic to bring patients in, and as a um, yeah, so that way, this is, if you end up transitioning with something, doing something different, and maybe opening down a practice down the road at some point in time, then and you end up taking patients with you, then that's a loss for us. So we need to be, I need, that basically having that worked into the agreement so that you protect yourself. Um, and so that way, it, the financial agreement is entered into before that person becomes an associate in the practice. So now that you have heard me share some of the reasons to still consider hiring an associate anyway, and not be afraid of how they might just leave and take patients with them, and let that stop you from making this expansive growth in your practice. Because the truth is that you're going to hit a point in capacity, if you haven't already, if you're likely thinking about it, that you probably have. So with every level of growth, it's normal to feel that fear. It's normal to be wondering, or maybe even being a little bit concerned. But you just need to have the things that we talked about in place. For example, do you have a system in place that supports generating new patients at a more consistent flow of patients beyond what you're used to? Do you have systems in place that also support getting the person trained, and are you creating a culture that people want to really be a part of? And so the next thing you'll need is then to also be able to find that associate, right? Because if you're attracting the wrong hire, then you might have a greater chance of finding yourself in one of the situations where you feel like there's turnover or you feel dissatisfied and that kind of thing. So that's really important as you're growing to this next level. So how do you attract the right associate? How do you find the right hire right now? So I actually am happy to give you access to a free masterclass and half your hiring time toolkit that you can easily incorporate within your practice to help you start to go in that direction of being able to free up your energy, I mean, free up your time more and have the practice help more people while making more money in your practice without you always having to be there. So you're welcome to go to www.halfyourhiringtime.com/toolkit. Again, it's www.halfyourhiringtime.com/toolkit. So click on the link when you will actually, we'll put it in below too, and click on it and then get yourself the Have Your Hiring Time toolkit. Also, benefit from the free masterclass where I share things that I basically have seen that isn't really taught out there that has made a big difference for a lot of our chiropractor clients in attracting, finding the right hire, and also fostering their new hires so that they would want to stay. So um, look forward to you growing with and enjoying being able to help more people without you always having to be there, and to you waking up the planet.